I was born on June 14th, 1941 in New Hampton, Iowa. I went to the Naval Academy right after high school in July of 1959, and I was 17 years old, and I just turned 18 at that time. And I went to the Naval Academy for 4 years, graduated in June of 1963, and then went on active duty until June. Officially went in January of 1965. Probably hit the war zone when we were in Yokosuka, which is where we were home ported. We flew in there. I left Sandy there with the other wives, and I flew into the war zone latter part of January 1965. Yeah, I think I was pretty well prepared for what the duties that I was doing, and I wasn't prepared for, we were landing Marines and Army guys on the beaches, and then we brought in some swift boats and landed those on the beaches of Vietnam. I wasn't prepared for the actual experiencing closely, not as closely as a bullet, but closely with these guys that we landed on in Vietnam. And we would transit, maybe take 2 or 3 weeks to transit from Subic Bay or Okinawa with these Marines or Army guys. And we'd have bridge watches at night, so the guys would come up and they'd sit there and talk to us. And you get close to them, in 2 or 3 weeks. And so you'd land them, and then, as I told you, I was decoding the messages that would come back, and in some cases I would see that these guys had died or had gotten injured, and that was pretty hard. Yeah, I came on as the operations officer, and the operations officer had all of the radar guys worked for me, the radio communication guys worked for me, the electronic technicians all were a part of my group. And so what I did is I ran the operations side of the ship for the captain and the XO. In addition to that, because our XO, who was normally the navigator for the ship, didn't have any experience, and I'd had a lot of navigation in college, so I was also the navigator for the ship. And the navigator, basically what I did is, if we're going to go from Subic Bay to Chu Lai, Vietnam, I'd lay out the course on the charts and then put the orders together for the officer of the deck, telling them what courses to take, when to make changes, when we would arrive, and how to know when we would arrive. And then I checked that every so often, several times a day, report to the captain where we were relative to that, to where we were supposed to be, and then report back to the staff where we were. So I basically planned and controlled the movement of the ship. I was the registered publication custodian, and basically I had all the secret documents in a safe that I was responsible for. And one of the documents was a coding document, and what you had to do is you had a coding machine. It was like a teletype machine, and you'd put the proper code in, and when that message would come in, it would come in and code. It'd be all garbled, right? So you'd type in that garbled, and it'd come out plain text. That there was a general broadcast of all the messages that were going, maybe from different commands to different ships. And as these would come in, I'd put them into my machine and I'd type in the code, and then it would come out and it would say, this is to Compact Fleet, this is to the Washtenaw County, which was my ship, CO Washtenaw County. So if it said Washtenaw County in there, I'd decrypt the rest of the message. If it didn't, I was supposed to not decrypt it, but if it looked interesting, sometimes I'd decrypt it anyhow and read it, and then destroy it, of course. We would land these guys and then see them going up over the hill, and we'd see the bombs and the firefighting there, but it wasn't real close. Occasionally we got a couple of shots lobbed at us, but nothing real seriously close. The biggest danger to our ships was if we were in, say, Da Nang Harbor and we were anchored, they would send swimmers out with bombs to try and place bombs on the bottom of your ship and blow a hole in it. And they did get one of our ships, didn't get mine. So what we would do is we'd put boats, patrol boats, in the water, and we'd put all the lights on, and those boats would run around our ship to keep swimmers away. And the other thing we'd do is when we were anchored, we'd keep the screws turned. So that would create a flow, and it would make it very hard for somebody to swim up on your ship. And fortunately, we never did have any of that. We got several times where we got fairly close, landing groups of guys, picking them up after an operation and moving them back and forth. At one time, I took a group of, they were called them UDTs, Underwater Demolition Team. They're the SEALs today. And we took them up the Hue River, which the Hue River was right in between North and South Vietnam. And we were scouting the bottom of that river in the event that we would do an invasion through there. That was kind of the thought at the time. So I took a group of, I think it was about 6 or 7. We had 3 boats. And we took them up, and then they would survey the bottom and write it, and we went along. About halfway through it, we pulled over to the side. There was a lady there with a cart, and we bought some beer and some pop and had a picnic there. And I mean, that was a funny thing about this. That was the kind of war it was. We never saw anybody. I had a flak vest on, had my M16, and all of my troops were armed. And obviously these swimmers, we were protecting them. A few weeks later, they sent another group in there to check some of the stuff we did, and they killed all of them. So you didn't know, and you maintained vigilance. But like I said, we pulled over to the side and had a picnic. When we were, this was after we came back, and I had a good friend, Dave Carey, who was a year behind me at the academy. In fact, he was captain of the wrestling team in '64, and I was in '63. So when I came back in '64, he and I spent quite a bit of time together. We got to be pretty good friends. He got shot down in Vietnam and was 8 years in prison camp. And then he came back, and we were in San Francisco, and they arrived at Oak Knoll Hospital, and I called him just to touch base with him, and the gal that they had an answering machine, an answering person, and said, well, we can't connect you directly to Dave. And I said, well, why is that? She said, well, because these protesters are calling and harassing these people, yelling at them, shouting at them, calling them killers. And then if they find out who they are, they'll start calling their wives and girlfriends and parents. Can you imagine that? That's what they were doing. That's where these stupid protesters, that they're more violent than these guys are. Yeah, it was hard because there was. It's pretty hard to understand that, how today everybody says thank you for your service and stuff like that. It wasn't like that. I mean, I didn't have very many of these personal experiences, but I heard of a lot of my friends where you'd be in your uniform and somebody come up and spit on you.
Really?
Yeah. And these kind of people that were doing that obviously weren't the good people, right? They were the dregs and the slugs, and they were vehement, hated the guy because he was wearing a uniform. Amazing to me. One of the things that I've kind of decided, and maybe not so much at the time, was that it made no sense for us to be there. But I was going to do my duty, and I wasn't gonna run and hide.